I'm on the beach. It's a winter afternoon. It's not dark yet, but the sun is back behind the trees up above me on the hill, so it's kind of dark here. A bit gloomy, I guess, but peaceful. All right. I'm going to talk about objectivity. Basically, there are 2 or maybe 3 dogmas of objectivity, or you could say false hopes in a way, or things people don't want to accept about subjectivity. So like the 2 main dogmas of objectivity are objective value and objective truth. And it's kind of hard to understand how anybody can believe in these things, considering that we know that there is a brain. So anybody who actually thinks about it should come to the conclusion, unless they believe in some sort of magical thing, which of course a lot of them, they do, and sometimes the magic is there to protect them from facing the truth about subjectivity, and sometimes it's something that was already there, like religion. But anyway, if you have a modern understanding of psychology, then you believe that the brain is the place where information comes in from the senses, is interpreted, and is used to generate action. And then action is generated by sending signals to the muscles, right? Sending out, twitch signals, essentially, to different muscle fibers. So if you have this understanding of the brain, which is basic and testable, and it's about as incontrovertible as like evolution or any other basic theory, well then it's pretty obvious that truth and value are subjective, in the sense that they are events or, judgments, whatever, taking place inside the brain. Right? Inside the brain, something is going on, and that corresponds to you seeing a tree, or you wanting an ice cream cone, or you walking a few steps down the road, or whatever, right? All that stuff involves events inside the brain, neurons firing in the brain, right? When you make a value judgment, it's not that you're seeing the real value out there in the world or something like that, or communing with the Platonic realm of value. Your brain has emotions, heuristics, and it also has stored knowledge, and some of that knowledge is about what is good or bad for you, basically. There's also knowledge about what's good or bad from your within your society. Moral norms are in your brain too. But regardless, it's all in your brain, right? It's in your brain that the judgment occurs, and the judgment is not some part of your brain leaping out of your skull to commune with some magical realm. The judgment occurs because neurons fire in a certain way, deterministically, they react to some stimulus in a predictable way. You get hungry, so there's a stimulus, an internal stimulus in that case. Lower blood sugar generates, a motivation to eat, and you walk past an ice cream shop and you smell the ice cream and you recognize the smell as ice cream because you have that knowledge stored in your brain, and ice cream is food. You have prior experiences with ice cream. So your brain forms the idea, oh, I should have an ice cream cone. And then you go into the store and you get the ice cream cone. And all that stuff happened in your brain. It didn't happen in a magical realm of, fairy dust or whatever, like some kind of whatever. I don't know what the Platonic realm is supposed to be, but it doesn't happen somewhere else in some magical place or realm or dimension of reality. It's just neurons firing in a brain. Neurons fire in a certain way, under certain conditions, causing your muscles to twitch. You turn, you walk into the store, you take out your wallet, and so on. Of course, it's enormously complex, and it's hard for most people to understand how, the firing of neurons could produce something that complex, like, the idea I should have an ice cream cone, or the behavior of walking into the store to buy an ice cream cone. But it's really just, the sheer amount of neurons and the ways that they're firing. And we can understand the underlying principles of that. So, with, not even with neuroscience, but just with information theory and probability theory and machine learning and all these things, we can start to understand what's going on in the brain. That doesn't mean there's no mysteries, like that we know everything 100%, but we certainly, are acquiring more and more knowledge about the brain, and there's nothing in the knowledge that we have acquired that points in the direction of a magical realm of, platonic forms or anything else like that. It's just neurons firing in a brain. And I think this bothers a lot of people. I'm not quite sure why. I guess I can't fully relate because I've never had any other opinion. I don't have to, I don't have some other dogma to cling to. But it really seems to bother people that their judgments, their choices, their values, their knowledge of the world is all inside a brain. It's brain dependent, and there's no brain independent standard by which you could judge it or say that it's correct or incorrect. There's no objective truth that you can compare your beliefs to and say, oh, well, look, see, they match objective truth. You can do things, like you can do an experiment, but the experiment is affecting your brain, right? It's not something else. When you do an experiment, you're acting in the world, so you're twitching your muscles to create a certain effect, and then you're observing the effect, and if the effect is what you predicted, then you say, it fits my hypothesis or my theory. And if the effect is not what you predicted, then you say, I guess my theory is wrong. But you're not ever getting outside your head, right? And you don't get outside your head with moral norms. I mean, those are basically just conformity. So there's really nothing more going on with morality than there is going on with language, right? You can learn to speak a language. That doesn't mean language is some objective, mind-independent thing that exists out there in, some other realm. It's just something we created collectively. We create it collectively by trying to communicate. And we create moral norms by living together in a society and coming to agreements about how we should behave and what's good for us as a collective. And that's all morality is. And there's no mystery about how that gets into your head either. There could be a mystery if you want there to be a mystery. If you don't want to understand it, you can always place obstacles in the way of understanding it, but it isn't that hard to understand. If you legitimately want to understand it, it's pretty easy to come up with a theory of it. Now, a lot of people, especially this sort of new theists or religious people, they think that if you believe that truth is subjective, they think that if truth is subjective, or if you believe that truth is subjective, then you can't make any claim, because you're saying, well, it's just arbitrary or it's just subjective. But this is nonsense. I mean, obviously I can make claims, and I regard my claims to be true. But this all depends on a bunch of assumptions, like the assumption that the person I'm talking to is a reasonably intelligent human being with a similar brain, with access to similar information, and so can be persuaded in the same way that I was persuaded. That's what reason is, right? It's just giving somebody else the reasons for a belief that you find persuasive. And it's possible that the other person will not be persuaded because, they have some dogma that they can't let go of, or they don't like you, or whatever, right? Or they are stupid, or, there could be lots of reasons, but there's no guarantee. But that doesn't mean you can't make claims or arguments, because truth is subjective. And likewise for value, if you say, well, there is no, objective value, or morality is a delusion, it's just collective values, not objective values. Well, they'll then say, oh, well, you can't say anything now because, you can't say that I shouldn't punch you in the face because, if there's no morality, then I guess I can punch you in the face. Well, I mean, you can try, right? And then I could try punching you back or whatever, or we could go to the police, or, there's lots of things that could happen regardless of whether morality exists, right? But no, I can still say, here's what we should do, here's how we should conduct ourselves, without pretending that this comes from God, or that is written to the cosmos or something like that, or written into the fabric of the human brain or logic or any of that other stuff. I can just say, presuming we want more or less the same things for ourselves, well, then we can come up with collective solutions to problems, right? I mean, that's like the prisoner's dilemma. Like, let's say we both want something, and we both want, we both have things that we individually value, and but if we both pursue our interests without cooperating, then we will not get what we value. We'll end up, fighting each other, and we'll end up both losing. But if we cooperate, then we can both get what we want. Now, if that's the case, if we can get what we want by cooperating, well, then I can make the argument, hey, we should cooperate. Let's find a way to do it. Now, you might still, defect, or I might defect, so we have to come up with ways of preventing defection. That's what society does. That's why we have police, just agreeing, let's not rape and murder doesn't make it happen. You gotta have the police, you gotta have some mechanism for enforcing it. Just saying, let's not shit in the drinking water doesn't guarantee it's not gonna happen. So, yeah, so we can come up with ways of enforcing collective values or imposing them on ourselves. So there's really, again, there's no big mystery here. It's not complicated. It doesn't require a magic sky fairy or a magic realm of forms or any other bullshit. It can all be understood as, okay, we have brains and we live in a world and we're sort of interacting with the world and interacting with each other and we're trying to find solutions to our own problems, yada yada. And the same thing goes for individual value. We can understand where that comes from. Like, why do you want one thing and not another thing? Why do you not want to get kicked in the head? Why do you want an ice cream cone? Why do you want to have sex? Well, you want those things because you have emotions. That's part of the brain. And the emotions evolved to make you reproduce. And we can see that pattern behind all the emotions. We can identify biological function relative to reproduction. And we can understand the whole mechanism and how it works to generate action. So again, no big mystery here, no magic, no God, no platonic realm, just a brain that reacts to stimuli in certain ways. And again, there's lots of complexity going from, firing of a few neurons in the brain to I want an ice cream cone. But they're, the basic underlying principles are not that complicated. We have a number of different motivations. They sort of trade in the same currency, which we can call just motivation. The motivation to act or will or something like that. That goes up and down, and it also gets attached to different ideas. So you get the will attached to an idea, like I should have an ice cream cone, and now you go and you try to do that. You try to make that happen, and your brain generates a plan, a sequence of events, a model of your actions in the world that ends with that goal being true, right, being real. And so then you go and you act out the plan, and if everything works out, you get your ice cream cone. So I don't really understand why people are so desperate to try and avoid this truth, that these things are subjective and that you are just a brain, that this is just stuff happening in a brain. This is not magic. Why do people need to believe it's magic? Why? Why can't they accept it's just a brain? You're just neurons firing in a brain. Why is that so hard to believe? I don't really get it. I mean, maybe it is because it doesn't seem like it. But how would you know what it feels like to be neurons firing in a brain, right? I mean, maybe it's because obviously you can't introspect down to the level of neurons. You can only introspect down to the level of ideas and feelings. You don't get any lower than that. But again, there's no mystery there. You couldn't get lower than that because you are consciousness. And obviously, consciousness has to be built out of subconscious processes. So again, there's no mystery. Consciousness, I mean, I guess there is a bit of a mystery which we'll never be able to solve, just like what happened at the beginning of time or something like that. We can't really, and why is there something instead of nothing? Well, we can't really answer those questions. And the same thing goes for why does it feel like this to be alive? I mean, there's just no way to answer it. What's sometimes called the hard problem of consciousness, which is like, could a machine do all the same things that I'm doing without having these, conscious experiences and stuff? Well, the problem with that is that there's just no way to know, because there's no way to know. Like there's no way to compare one subjectivity to another. So we're trapped in our subjectivity. But you don't demystify that in any way by assuming that there's something else. Like we're partaking of some subjective essence that pervades the universe, or I'm part of God's mind, or none of this gets us anywhere. Because you still have to have the notion of subjectivity. I mean, even if, we were to believe in panpsychism or something like that, like subjectivity is everywhere and everything, it's the primal constituent of reality or something. Well, what does that actually predict? How does that get us anywhere? How would that be any different from saying causality is the prime constituent? And also, it's still like, it just doesn't solve the problem. Like you could still say, well, couldn't the universe exist without having this psychism stuff? Like, couldn't a mechanical universe do the same things? Right? So you have the exact same mind-body problem, but now it's the mind-universe problem. And you have, you still have all the problems of how do I explain my interactions with other minds. Obviously, I can't psychically communicate with them, so if the whole universe is psyche, then why do I have to write something down or speak? Why do we need traffic signals? How come four-way stops are such a pain in the ass sometimes? It's just like, if the world were all like mind, well, why isn't it all mind? Like why doesn't there seem to be any mind in this log I'm standing on, or the water here? Where are the properties of mind in this? Because normally the properties of mind are things like the way we recognize another mind is that it's acting intentionally. So, it's doing things like getting an ice cream cone because it's hungry, or it's trying to communicate with us. And we can best explain its behavior as positing that it is similar to ourselves, and so that's how we believe it has mind. Like I believe cats and dogs have minds because they interact in very similar ways to the way humans act. They have emotions, they feel, I'm sure they feel emotions. When you pet a cat and it purrs, I'm sure it's feeling good. Probably has some oxytocin released or something like that, Now, I don't know what it would be like to have a cat's consciousness. I'm sure it's not the same as mine. But of course, I don't know what it's like to have anyone's consciousness, including my own. Like, I don't know what it's like to be me. I can only know what it's like to be me now versus at some other point in time. I can never know what it's like to be me. So how would I know what it's like to be anything else? Or, what it's like to be a rock. So I think all this stuff like panpsychism or pantheism, or, it's all just like some kind of weird cope to just deal with the disenchantment of reality by science. And I guess to deal with the cognitive dissonance that comes from understanding that you're just a machine, a mechanical thing, a brain in a skull that reacts deterministically to other things, interacts with the world deterministically, I don't know. Again, I don't get it fully. I can't put myself in somebody else's mind and understand why they're so bothered by that. It doesn't really have any implications other than you're not a magical being. All right, I think I'll end it there. I don't know if this was anything more than a rant. I'm sort of distracted because something moved here. I'm looking at a kind of a little creek that flows into the ocean, and it's covered in logs, like driftwood. So it's like a big tangle of logs, but I saw something move in there. So like I'm trying to figure out what it is. Like what would be in there? Maybe an otter, but this isn't the sort of place you'd usually find an otter. So what the heck was it? I don't know. I mean, we do have otters on this beach, but they wouldn't go up this shitty little creek because it's just not a good place for them. So I don't know, but maybe some kind of creature is hiding in here. That's distracting me. So if you're one of these people who believes in objective truth, or believes in objective value, or objective morality, or, panpsychism, or any of these other things, explain to me what that gets you. What is that doing in your head? Well, why do you need it? What's it, like, if you let go of that idea, what would happen? Like, that's what I tried to say to Orwell at the end of our last discussion. I said, just for one moment, just imagine there is no objective truth. Now, what's the problem? What is left unexplained, or what's harder to explain? What's what's bothering you about that? Like, why can't you just consider that possibility? Just consider it. You don't even have to believe it. I'm not saying you must jump into that, that worldview right away, but just consider the possibility. If there's no objective truth, what's the problem? If there's no objective value, what's the problem? Yeah, if morality is just us making up, rules for getting along or principles for interacting and stuff, and it's not magic, it's not built into the fabric of the galaxies, so what? What's the big deal? Why is that a big problem for you? All right, anyway, I'll end it there. As always, thanks for listening.